Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you all for hopping aboard with me. We have the Secret Service Director, Director Cheadle, okay, regarding the attempted assassination of former president and hopefully future president Donald J. Trump, as well as the death of a gentleman who was a fire department chief, who was there with his family, and there was also others that were injured. So
And the
she is giving
tactical
testimony
team who
about
is
that. So
prepared
let's
to
bring it
act.
in.
I will be transparent as possible when I speak with you, understanding, though, at times that I may be limited in providing a thorough response in this open setting due to associated risks with sharing highly sensitive protective methodologies. I do not want to inadvertently provide you today with inaccurate information. Since January 1st, 2024, the Secret Service has successfully secured over 7,500 sites. Every protective advance comes with its own set of challenges and requires a customized mitigation strategy, including specific assets. Security plans are multi-layered, providing 360 degrees of protection. These layers include personnel, technical, and tactical assets, which are a force multiplier for our protective posture. During every advance, we attempt to strike a balance between enabling the protectee to be visible and our protective requirements to be secure. I know this because I have spent 29 years in this agency. I came up through the ranks. I've secured events for every president since President Clinton, supervised on Vice President Cheney's detail, led our training center, oversaw all of the investigations and protective visits in the state of Georgia, supervised on Vice President Biden's detail, and the agency's entire protective mission during the Trump administration. The comprehensive advance process involves collaborative planning between our Secret Service, the protectees staff, enforcement partners, and the level of security provided for the former president increased well before the campaign and has been steadily increasing as threats evolve. The security plan included a full assessment of the Butler Farm showgrounds to identify security vulnerabilities and craft a security plan for the protectee, attendees, and the public. Immediately following the assassination attempt, I directed the activation of my crisis center. I assembled my executive team to begin surging more protective resources to the former president and to ensure the wellness of our people post-incident, all while securing an active crime scene. I immediately ordered a reevaluation of the Republican National Convention security plan, and I increased the security posture in the National Capital Region for all permanent protectees and sites. At the same time, I initiated a mission assurance investigation within our agency. I have instructed my team that all necessary resources will be dedicated to investigating these matters. We will not rest until we have explored every option, and we will leave no stone unturned. But I want to be clear, I am not waiting for these investigations to be completed prior to making changes. Over the past 2 weeks, we successfully led the planning and execution of the 75th NATO Summit and the Republican National Convention. Over the next few months, we will implement security plans for the Democratic National Convention, the United Nations General Assembly, and have already begun planning and coordinating the 2025 inauguration. It is now more important than ever for the men and women of the Secret Service to remain resilient and to focus on what is necessary to carry out our critical mission. Our agency needs to be adequately resourced in order to serve our current mission requirements and anticipate future requirements. The Secret Service currently protects 36 individuals on a daily basis, as well as world leaders who visit the United States, like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who arrived in Washington, D.C. today. The coming years will bring an unprecedented heavy protection tempo. I have no doubt that the processes that I have implemented during my tenure as director, in addition to my nearly 30 years of experience in this agency, have positioned the Secret Service to be stronger. Our mission is not political. It is literally a matter of life and death, and the tragic events on July 13th remind us of that. I have full confidence in the men and women of the Secret Service. They are worthy of our support in executing our protective mission. I will now answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Director Cheadle. We'll now begin our 5 minutes questions, and I will begin. Just for the record, the Secret Service has annual budget of around $3.1 billion, and I believe around 8,000 employees. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Obviously, there were many security failures on the day of the attempted assassination and leading up to that day. Let's start with the building that the shooter used to shoot President Trump from. At any point Saturday, did the Secret Service have an agent on top of that roof?
Sir, I'm sure, as you can imagine, that we are just 9 days out from this incident, and there's still an ongoing investigation. And so I want to make sure that any information that we are providing to you is
You
factual.
can't, okay. Why did the Secret Service not, can you answer why the Secret Service didn't place a single agent on the roof?
We are still looking into the advanced process and the decisions that were made.
Okay. Wasn't that building within the perimeter that should be secured? Do we agree with that?
The building was outside of the perimeter on the day of the visit. But again, that is one of the things that during the investigation, we want to take a look at and determine whether or not other decisions should have been made.
One of the things that you said, I believe in an interview, that there wasn't an agent on the roof because it was a sloped roof. Is that normal? And do you fear that immediately creates an opportunity for future would-be assassins to look for a slanted roof? I mean, this is a huge question that every American has. Why wasn't a Secret Service agent on the roof? And there have been reports that agents were supposed to be on the roof, but it was hot that day and they didn't want to be on the roof. Can you answer any of those questions, Director?
So I appreciate you asking me that question, Chairman. I should have been more clear in my answer when I spoke about where we place personnel in that interview. What I can tell you is that there was a plan in place to provide overwatch, and we are still looking into responsibilities and who was going to provide overwatch. But the Secret Service in general, not speaking specifically to this incident, when we are providing overwatch, whether that be through counter snipers or other technology, prefer to have sterile rooftops.
Did the Secret Service use any drones for surveillance that day?
So again, I'm not going to get into specifics of that day in itself, but there are times during a security plan that the Secret Service does deploy an asset like a drone.
There were reports that the shooter used a drone just a few hours before the rally start time. Is that accurate?
I have heard those same reports, and again, am waiting for the final report.
Do you know, if you can't answer the question, that's your answer. But can you answer this? Do you know? I'm not asking yes or no, but do you know if the shooter used a drone before the shooting?
That information has been passed to us from the FBI.
How many Secret Service agents were assigned to President Trump on the day of the rally?
Again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the numbers of personnel that we had there, but we feel that there was a sufficient number of agents assigned.
There are reports that several agents assigned to the rally on July 13th were temporary agents not normally assigned to President Trump. Is that accurate?
What I can tell you is that the agents that were assigned to former President Trump are Secret Service agents that provide close protection to him, and that was what was actual on that day.
How many temporary agents were there that day?
Quite frequently, sir, during campaign events, the Secret Service utilizes agents from HSI or the Department of Homeland Security.
You don't know
to
how
help
many?
supplement our plan.
Have the investigators reconstructed the shooter's precise movements over the past days, weeks, and months?
So again,
We need to have confidence that if the FBI is leading this investigation, that they're leading a credible investigation, because there's some of us sitting up here today that don't have a lot of confidence in the FBI. So I will repeat the question. Have the investigators reconstructed the shooter's precise moments over the days?
I understand your question, Chairman, and I share your concerns about wanting to make sure that we have factual information. The FBI is conducting a criminal investigation. The Secret Service is conducting an internal investigation. There are a number of OIG investigations, and there is the external investigation.
Okay.
The president
Last question for me. Before July 13th, had the Trump detail requested additional resources?
What I can tell you is that for the event on July 13th, the details that were the assets that were requested for that day were given.
Okay. My time has expired. Chair now recognizes ranking member asking for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been reported that before former President Trump got up on the stage at around 6 p.m. on Saturday, July 13th, that the local police had identified and even photographed a man who was acting suspiciously. And this man, who turned out to be the gunman, had been flagged as a potential threat. Is that accurate?
What I can say is that the individual was identified as suspicious.
So he was known to be suspicious before former President Trump took the stage.
That is the information I have received.
Why was he allowed to take the stage with a suspicious person having been identified in the crowd?
So I appreciate the question, and I'd like to make 2 points. If the detail had been past information that there was a threat, the detail would never have brought the former president out onto stage. That is what we do, and that is who we are. We are charged with protecting all of our protectees.
So you distinguish between someone who is suspicious and someone who's threatening, is that
I
right?
do. There are a number of times at protective events where suspicious people are identified, and those individuals have to be investigated and determined what is it that identifies that person as suspicious.
So did you deny a request for additional resources that had been made by the Trump campaign?
There were no assets denied for that event in Butler on the 13th.
I see. So you're saying there were requests made for additional assistance for other specific events rather than for the campaign as a whole. Is that right?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
Well, you seem to say that there were not additional resources requested for that event. And forgive me for being unfamiliar with this. Is it requested event by event, or is it requested just in general for the campaign?
So if I can explain the advance process, when an event or a venue is identified by, in this case, campaign staff, then the campaign staff works together with Secret Service agents who go out and conduct an advance. Generally, that is a 5-day time period where those discussions are had about what the perimeter is going to look like, what the size of the event is, what the venue is, and then from there, there is a request made to mitigate potential risk and threat. And I'm saying that on that day, the requests that were pushed forward were granted.
So the Secret Service did not know that the gunman actually had a weapon before President Trump was allowed to get up on the stage?
To the best of our knowledge and the facts that we have at this point, that is correct.
So can you answer this question, which I think is on the mind of most Americans thinking about this? How can a 20-year-old with his father's AR-15 assault weapon climb onto a roof with a direct 150-yard line of sight to the speaker's podium without the Secret Service or local police stopping him?
So again, sir, I will say we are 9 days out from this event, and I would like to know those answers as well, which is why we are going through these investigations to be able to determine that fully.
Okay. It's been reported that the shooter was not carrying a driver's license or any form of identification. They had no idea who he was, but then he was quickly identified, I think within 30 minutes, by using the serial number on the AR-15 under a tracing system that is now controversial. Some people say we should get rid of it. Some people want to keep it. But is that right, that the serial number was the key information which led to the identification of the shooter?
That is my understanding, sir, yes.
Okay. If an American citizen were just to stop you and say, Director Cheadle, we support your work to the tune of billions of dollars and thousands of employees, what went wrong? What would you say?
Again, knowing that we're 9 days out, I would say, as I have said from the very outset, I accept responsibility for this tragedy. We are going to look into how this happened, and we are going to take corrective action to ensure that it never happens again.
Well, I appreciate that, and I hope you will act with vigor and focus and intensity, and it seems you understand the gravity and solemnity of this to the American people. Millions and millions of Americans don't feel safe with all the AR-15s out there. We thought at least the president of the United States or a former president of the United States would be safe, but now that's not even clear. Mr. Chairman, I yield back to you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, were you guessing or lying? The day after President Trump is shot, Secret Service spokesman Anthony Guglielmi said, quote, "The assertion that a member of the former president's security team requested additional security resources that the U.S. Secret Service or the Department of Homeland Security rebuffed is absolutely false." The next day, Secretary Mayorkas said, "That is an unequivocally false assertion. We had not received any request for additional security measures that were rebuffed." But 5 days later, the Washington Post said this: "Top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel." The next day, the New York Times said this: "Mr. Guglielmi acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down some requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail." So which is it? Because both statements can't be true. Were you guessing or lying when you said you didn't turn down requests from President Trump's detail?
Neither, sir, and I appreciate the question.
Well, what were you doing? Because those statements don't jive.
So what I can tell you is that for the event in Butler, there were no requests that were denied. As far as requests,
Well, maybe they got tired of asking. Maybe you turned them down so darn much, they said, not worth asking. How many times did you turn them down ahead of that?
I think that it is important to distinguish between what some people may view as a denial of an asset or a request.
Well, is
does
Mr.
not-
Guglielmi your spokesperson? He said he acknowledged the Secret Service had turned down some requests. I'm asking how many?
A denial of a request does not equal a vulnerability.
Well, tell me what it is.
There are a number of ways that threats and risks can be mitigated with a number of different assets, whether that be through personnel, whether that be through technology or other resources.
Well, tell the committee which it was. They asked for additional help in some form or another. You told them no. How many times did you tell them no, and what'd you tell them no to?
Again, I cannot speak to specific incidents, but I can tell you in general terms, the Secret Service is judicious with their resources based on.
What does some requests mean? How many times? Some indicate requests is plural. So more than once they asked for additional help and you turned them down. What did they ask for and how many times did you turn them down? Pretty basic questions.
So again, without having all of the details in front of me, sir, what I can tell you is that there are times.
You didn't get briefed on how many times you turned down the Trump detail when they asked for additional help?
I'm sorry.
You didn't get briefed on that before you came to this hearing, knowing you were going to get asked that question?
What I can tell you is that in generic terms, when details make a request, there are times that there are alternate ways to cover off on that threat or that risk.
But that's not what he said. He said they were denied certain requests, some requests. This
I-
is your spokesperson, not me talking. This is the Secret Service talking.
I
And what a change from absolutely false, unequivocally false to, oh, by the way, there were some times where we didn't give them what they wanted. That's a huge change in 5 days. And the fact that you can't answer how many times you did that, that's pretty darn frustrating, not just for me, but for the country.
I hear your frustration.
Let me ask you this. Were any of those requests denied to President Trump's detail after you knew about the Iranian threat?
What I can tell you, again, I don't know the specifics, is that there are times when we can fill a request. It doesn't necessarily have to be with a Secret Service asset or resource. We can fill that request with locally available assets.
You
and
spoke to anyone at the
resources.
White House since July 13th?
Yes, I have.
Who'd you talk to?
I have briefed the president and the vice president.
Talk to the First Lady?
No, I have not.
Talk to the White House staff? Anyone in the White House communications?
No, I have not.
Have you talked to the counter sniper who took the shot that took out the bad guy?
Yes, I have.
And can you tell us about that conversation?
I would not want to reveal conversations that I've had with my employees.
But that's exactly the kind of information the American people want to know. American people who pay your salary.
I understand this is an ongoing investigation, and I
Who's
want
all
to be
doing the
cautious.
investigating at Secret Service? I know the Inspector General, but is there also an internal investigation in addition to the Inspector General?
We are conducting a mission assurance investigation internally, yes.
You know what it looks like, Director? It looks like you won't answer some pretty basic questions. It looks like you got a 9% raise and you cut corners when it came to protecting one of the most important individuals, most well-known individuals on the planet. A former president, likely the guy's going to be the next president. Looks like you guys were cutting corners. That's what it looks like to me. Is that true?
I am here today because I want to answer questions, but I also want to be cautious.
You might want to, but you haven't answered. I don't think you've answered one question from the chairman, the ranking member, or me. Well, we got a lot of other people asking. We'll see if your record improves. But right now, you haven't answered, I don't think, any questions. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the summer of 1963, as a law student, I traveled to the South to work in the civil rights movement. When I arrived in Jackson, Mississippi, I was met by a civil rights activist who showed me around town and tried to convince me to work in Jackson that summer. I recall talking with him and his wife about the raw atmosphere in Jackson. Later that day, he took me to the bus station for my trip to my assignment. That night, he was assassinated outside his home. His name was Medgar Evers. I condemn the political violence. It is a threat to democracy. I want to discuss one of the roots of political violence, guns. For years, Republicans, including a member of this committee, have introduced legislation and amendments to repeal or block the District of Columbia gun violence protection laws, including its bans on assault weapons and large capacity magazines. The shooter at the Trump rally used the mass shooter's gun of choice, an assault weapon, specifically an AR-15 style rifle, and presumably a large capacity magazine, which is defined in DC as a magazine that can hold more than 10 bullets. Under current DC law, DC does not recognize concealed carry permits issued by other jurisdictions, but it does issue concealed carry permits to both residents and non-residents. However, DC imposes a number of requirements on concealed carry applicants, including suitability, such as not having exhibited a propensity for violence or instability. Moreover, DC residents restricts where the guns can be carried, such as a political demonstration near the White House and Naval Observatory, or near people under Secret Service protection, provided the permit holder has been given notice. This week, the House is expected to consider the fiscal year 2025 Financial Services and General Government Appropriations Bill. This Republican drafted bill would allow an individual with a permit to carry a concealed handgun issued by a state or territory to carry a concealed handgun in DC, regardless of that jurisdiction's permit requirements. A Republican has filed an amendment to that provision to allow such an individual to carry a magazine of any size with that handgun. In short, the pending bill and amendment would allow any person with a carry permit issued by another jurisdiction to carry a concealed handgun with a magazine of any size in any location in the District of Columbia. The Secret Service is responsible for protecting a large number of people and facilities in DC. Director Cheadle, would Secret Service protectees in DC be safer or less safe if people who have exhibited a propensity for violence or instability could carry a concealed handguns in DC?
I think being a Secret Service
This lady is not talking about anything that has to do with the assassination attempt right now. This is all political right now. This has had nothing to do with what happened. Nothing to do with it.
agent and an officer or a law enforcement officer in any state is difficult. They are required to make decisions and snap judgments in the blink of an eye. And I think that the officers and the agents that work here in the DC area do a great job of monitoring the public and reacting to threats as appropriate when they arise.
Would Secret Service protectees in DC be safer or less safe if people in DC could carry concealed handguns with large capacity magazines?
I think, ma'am, that we work in parameters where we travel around North America, and the rules on open carry and concealed carry are different from state to state. And that is part of what the Secret Service takes into account when we develop a security plan. Obviously, anyone that comes into one of our protective sites, we would establish magnetometer support, metal detectors that personnel would have to process through, eliminating that potential.
Would Secret Service protectees in DC be safer or less safe if more people could carry handguns in DC?
I think, again, as I stated, ma'am, we want to make sure that we provide a safe environment for all of our protectees, and whatever measures we would need to put in place for a secure site, we would do so.
I yield back.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mr. Turner from Ohio.
Director Cheadle, your opening statement indicates that the Secret Service constructed a security plan for the site in Pennsylvania. I'm assuming that security plan would also include the security footprint for the site, but it also would be based upon a threat assessment for the threats associated with Donald Trump and the crowd in attendance. Would it not include a threat assessment?
Yes, it would.
So that threat assessment, as we know, basically would have started with, there's a generalized threat against Donald Trump because he is a presidential candidate. Then it would have gone to, he's a former president and he gets security coverage just as Bush, Clinton, Carter, and Obama do. And then you also have the heightened political environment. Even for those, it's clear that the security footprint, that the threat assessment was insufficient, which permitted then a 20-year-old to actually enter with a weapon and shoot Donald Trump. But I want to ask you about two other aspects of the threat assessment. It is known and public that Iran is a threat risk for Donald Trump. They're a threat risk for John Bolton, former Secretary of State Pompeo, and Donald Trump, because they have indicated they want to assassinate them as a result of retaliation for the killing of Soleimani. That is both for Iran a generalized threat. They're targeting these individuals, but also most recently a specific threat to Donald Trump himself. Now, I want to enter into the record by UC a Department of Justice Public Affairs release, a CNN article, an article from Fox News, and an article from CBS, all of which acknowledge
Without objection to order.
that this threat exists for Donald Trump from Iran, and that there are specific threats most recently that have been acknowledged. Director Cheadle, have you read the intelligence of the generalized threat to Donald Trump by Iran as a result of their desire to retaliate for the killing of Soleimani?
I have.
Have you read or been briefed about the intelligence of the specific recent threat to Donald Trump from Iran?
Yes, I have.
Director Wray, when we were getting our briefing, indicated that he thought the threat assessment should have included this threat from Iran. Is it your testimony today that the threat assessment, since you've read this intelligence, was sufficient to protect him from this threat from Iran?
My testimony today is that the information that we had at the time was known.
Was it sufficient? Director Cheadle, was it sufficient for the Iranian threat that you said you have read the intelligence briefings for?
That information was passed to.
Well, I'm not asking the
Hotel?
bureaucratic issue of who did it get passed around to. Director Cheadle, was it sufficient for the specific and generalized threats to Donald Trump's life from Iran?
Yes, I do believe it was.
Director Cheadle, is an Iranian assassin more capable than a 20-year-old?
Sir, I think we've acknowledged that there was gaps and a failure that day.
When I raised this issue with Director Wray, he was incensed. He was shocked that the threat assessment of Iran did not seem to be, as we and I discussed, baked in to your security footprint and your threat assessment. And he went on to say that the generalized threat that he has told the whole country that we are under from a terrorist a potential terrorist threat, he has said we're under the highest threat level since 9/11, that the lights are flashing red. And he has specifically indicated that people have crossed the southern border as a result of the Biden administration's policy, and that there are in our country today terrorists and individuals who are affiliated with terrorist groups and organizations. That would be a heightened threat environment, Director Cheadle, would it not?
Yes.
In his public statements, he has said he is making these statements because he wants people to take them into consideration in threat assessments, specifically. Now, that would be a threat not just to Donald Trump, but it would also be a threat to the crowd there, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Are ISIS terrorists and Al-Qaeda terrorists and international groups and terrorists more capable than a 20-year-old in pulling off either a mass shooting or an assassination of Donald Trump?
Sir, again, there was clearly a breakdown
Right.
and a failure that day.
Have you read the intelligence of the terrorists that are currently in the United States that Director Wray speaks, and those individuals that are here that are affiliated with terrorist groups and organizations that are in the process, as Director Wray said, of representing a significant threat of a terrorist attack occurring in the United States?
I have read reports that apply specifically to the Secret Service's mission.
Director Cheadle, because Donald Trump is alive, and thank God he is, you look incompetent. If Donald Trump had been killed, you would have looked culpable. There is no aspect of this that indicates that there has been any protection to Donald Trump. The threat was identified before he took the stage, and the shooter was only killed after Donald Trump himself was killed. Not only should you resign, if you refuse to do so, President Biden needs to fire you, because his life, Donald Trump's life, and all the other people which you protect are at risk because you have no concept of the aspect that the security footprint needs to be correlated to the threat. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheadle, there were multiple security failures at the former president's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. First of all, there was a failure to isolate the podium from exposure to direct fire. Do we know who made that decision to allow that rooftop to remain as an unprotected area? Do we know who came up with that security plan that omitted that?
Sir, I don't have a specific person to identify for you.
Okay, well, that's what I'm looking for. So let's move on. There's also a breakdown in security and failure to confront the shooter over an hour before the former president began his remarks, when the shooter was identified as a person of interest. What particularly allowed agents or law enforcement to identify him as a person of interest?
So I appreciate the question. And again, I will say that we are 9 days out, and there are a multitude of interviews that are still taking place.
Okay, so did he have a rangefinder? There were some reports that the individual had a rangefinder. That would certainly raise my suspicion. Did he have a rangefinder?
Yes, he did. But may I explain that at a number of our sites, especially when you're at outdoor venues, a rangefinder is not a prohibited item. It is sometimes an item that is brought in by individuals if you're
But
going to be in
did
the back.
anybody confront him on that? Anybody ask him questions? What are you doing with the rangefinder? Anybody confront him on his presence where he was in proximity to the president?
So again, to my knowledge, I believe that was the process that was taking place, was to locate the individual.
Did they confront him? Did they go up to him? Did they talk to him?
I do not have those details at
Okay,
this time.
those are important details. There was also a failure to communicate between law enforcement to act quickly upon information provided by either local law enforcement or rally attendees that the suspect was positioned on the roof. There were minutes of delay before any meaningful action was taken, even though he was several hundred feet from the podium. And this was obviously minutes before the shooting. Let me ask you, there was considerable delay in removing the president from the podium after the shooting began. He got shot in the air. It was still over a minute before he was removed from the stage. Meanwhile, this shooter had multiple clips, several clips. He got off 8 shots, and he had the capacity and the ability, if he was not neutralized, to basically mow down that whole Secret Service detachment as well as the president. What, from your own investigation, caused that delay under the circumstances?
What I can tell you is that when the agents identified that the shooting was taking place, in under 3 seconds, they threw themselves on top
Oh,
of
I
the
understand that
president.
there was heroism there. No question about it. No question about it. But protocol would indicate, and these are, these are the opinions of various former Secret Service agents, people who have done this work in the past, that over a minute of exposure on that podium with a shooter with a high capacity weapon who had already wounded the president and could have got off, we don't know how many more rounds, and yet the president remained exposed, even though he was joined in that exposure by the Secret Service in their heroic acts. It just, I don't know if there's a good explanation for that.
Our personnel created a body bunker on
I-
top of
I
the
get
president,
that. I get that.
shielding him.
Yeah, this was an AR-15 style weapon that would have made pretty quick work if he was determined and able to do so. This is not the first investigation that we've had of the Secret Service during my time here on this committee. And the last one we had, our previous investigation determined that the Secret Service was experiencing a staffing crisis that poses perhaps the greatest threat to the agency. And that's a quote. Is that staffing crisis still in place? Is that still something that you deal with on a daily basis?
As of today, the Secret Service has just over 8,000 employees. We continue to hire, knowing that we need to ensure that we keep pace with
What would be the full complement of,
And gentlemen, time's expired, but please answer the question.
I'm sorry.
what would be the full complement that you're looking for? You've got 8,000, and how many would be a full complement for the service?
So we are still striving towards a number of 9,500 employees approximately in order to be able to meet future and emerging needs.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your courtesy. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Dr. Fox from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheadle, what grade would you give the Secret Service's performance in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13?
As I've stated, ma'am, this was clearly a failure. I would grade the agents and officers who selflessly threw themselves in front of the president and neutralized the threat an A. I think that we need to examine the events that led up to and prior to that day.
You stated in 2021 that the Secret Service has a zero-fail mission. It's clear that the events of July 13 show a cascade of failures that cost Corey Comparator his life, nearly cost former president his life, and injured David Dutch and James Copenhaver. When an agency fails spectacularly at its mission, those responsible must be held accountable, and the problems must be fixed so they cannot happen again. Why should the American people or the officials you're responsible for protecting have confidence in your ability to lead the Secret Service after such a spectacular failure?
I appreciate the question, and I am committed to finding answers so that we can make the agency stronger after this.
You said on July 15 that the buck stops with me. How are you taking accountability for the Secret Service's failures during the July 13 assassination attempt on President Trump?
I have taken accountability, and I will continue to take accountability. I am responsible for leading the agency, and I am responsible for finding the answers to how this event occurred and making sure that it doesn't happen again.
So I would like to explore how you got the job as director of the United States Secret Service. Is it typical for the director of the Secret Service to be recommended for the role at the behest of a president's family and senior staff, perhaps at the request of Joe Biden or Anthony Bernal?
I got the job as a director of the Secret Service because I spent 27 years in an agency with a mission that I absolutely love. I started my career in Detroit. I worked my way up through investigations and protection.
Was there competition for the position?
You would have to ask those who were involved in the interview process.
But you think you are the best person in the country to head the Secret Service?
I think that I am the best person to lead the Secret Service at this time.
The Secret Service receives billions in funding each year, as has been explained by my colleagues here. In fact, you've had an increase in real terms of 55%. As you're no doubt aware, staffing levels for those assigned to protect the president, former presidents, and other senior officials has decreased by about 350 between 2014 and today. Clearly, a lack of financial resources not to blame for the staffing shortage. In 2022, the Secret Service saw nearly half its workforce leave in 1 year. During the same year, it was ranked dead last among law enforcement agencies in the best places to work in the federal government. Can you explain why your agency was so poorly rated and why so many staff left in just 1 year?
So with all due respect, I dispute the statistic of half of the employees leaving in 2022. I think that that has been inaccurate data that's been reported out there. But what I can tell you is, as I have returned as the director of the agency, we have had an increase in hiring and staffing and an increase in resources. And we are committed to continue to hire so that we can be staffed appropriately to meet the dynamic mission that we have.
Well, you may want to dispute it, but it's out there. My understanding, given the high profile failures and rotten culture at the Secret Service during your nearly 2-year tenure, why should the American people have any confidence in your ability to lead the Secret Service to perform its zero-fail mission to protect our senior leaders?
The Secret Service has an incredible culture. Our men and women place service over self. They come in every day willing to risk their lives for our protective mission. And they work investigations that thwart people who would do harm to children, child exploiters. We have an incredible mission, and our culture is we will get the job done no matter what.
Well, those on the front line certainly have a great culture, and they were willing to risk their lives for President Trump. But I'm not sure the leadership at the agency has this right kind of culture. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Conley from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I hope the American people do appreciate the incredible daily risks Secret Service agents take on our behalf. You mentioned there are 36 regular clients you've got that you protect constantly, but I was participating in the NATO summit just 2 weeks ago. We had 32 heads of government and heads of state, plus visiting heads of state and heads of government. Presumably, you provided protection for all of them.
That is correct.
Just saying. Help us understand, however, I will stipulate that there's an ongoing investigation. You don't want to go into too much detail on that until you've been able to ascertain all the facts and analyze. You can understand, however, the anxiety we and the American public have about how could this happen and how can we ensure it can't recur. Now, there are some things my friends on one particular side of the aisle don't really want to talk about, like AR-15s and access to them by a 20-year-old or anybody for that matter. Presumably, Director Cheadle, the ubiquity of weapons, guns in America, especially assault weapons or semi-automatic weapons, that's helped your job and the mission of your agencies, right? It's made it less complicated. Isn't that true?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
Real simple. More guns, especially dangerous ones, have made your job protecting people easier. Is that not right?
I think from every
Director
state,
Cheadle, This is simple English. More guns do they make your job more complicated or less complicated in protecting these 36 clients and visiting heads of state and heads of government that come to Washington?
I think the Secret Service needs to take into account
I didn't ask
the
that.
state that they're in.
I'm sorry. I asked a simple question, which deserves a simple answer. The ubiquity of guns, dangerous weapons in America, like AR-15s, has that made your job, that is to say, the mission of the Secret Service, easier or more difficult?
I think the threat environment for protecting our Secret Service protectees is always difficult, and that's dynamic and it's always evolving.
We stipulate it's always difficult. Again, this is a simple one. Does the ubiquity
All right, so basically, I'm gonna leave it off right there. I'm just gonna jump in here and try to catch us up to speed on what's being talked about right now. So they're having a congressional testimony of Director Cheadle. She's the current director of Secret Service, and it was her responsibility to make sure that the proper precautions was in place, right? So the property security measures and everything was in place so that this individual Thomas Crooks wasn't able to fire upon former President Trump, all right, at his rally. And there was a severe breakdown of protections. In my opinion, it was a setup. It's impossible for your job to be to protect one person, and an individual was allowed to be on a roof where there's only so many buildings in the area that the person can be on. How do you miss him being on a roof to set up his shot? And there were attendees to the rally who saw this individual and made notice of it, let other people who were there know, hey, there's a person on this roof, and it still wasn't taken care of. He was still able to get off multiple shots, right? With at least one hitting former President Donald J. Trump. So here she is being questioned, and shout out to Jordan. He asked very good questions. The lady did as well. I think her last name is Fox. A couple other people did as well. They were mainly on the Republican side. On the Democrat side, at least three of their representatives, their senators, have just attacked guns. You know, at a time where you have a former president be shot, all right, in an attempted assassination at his rally, you would think that the focus would be on the security breakdown. What happened? How was he allowed to be shot? That should be the focus, not how did the person use a gun and the gun is an AR-15 and that's an assault weapon, and we've got this just assault weapons being used everywhere in schools, churches, the mall, and so on and so forth. The weapon, first of all, is a rifle, right? It's an Armalite rifle. That's just the type of rifle it is. There are different types of rifles, okay? And AR-15 is no more special than your typical other rifle, right? It's a long gun. So they also, they got on this big thing about mass shootings and AR-15s being used in mass shootings. Most shootings in America, right? Even the mass shootings, most shootings are the tool of choice, right? Is a handgun, a pistol. That statistically is just the fact. Most shootings occur with handguns, not AR-15s. But they love to They use this type of language because they want to get to an end goal, right? The end goal is they want to just do away with the guns so that we're left defenseless. So then all only people that have guns are military, police, and criminals. That's really what it's trying to get to. But they're using the rifle thing because that's just low hanging fruit. And so here they are doing the same thing right here in this testimony where they're attacking the guns and gun ownership and what kind of gun you can have and how much artillery, how much ammo and all this type of stuff. None of that has anything to do with President Trump nearly getting his head, right? I can't get too graphic on here, but y'all know what would have happened, right? If he had been shot in a different place, right? He wouldn't be here anymore. That should be the focus. And it should be about why was this individual who happened to be in a BlackRock commercial last year, this same person, just coincidentally, he happens to be the person that comes out here to try to take out Trump. Like that's odd. He was allowed to walk around the premises before the rally. Nobody checked it out. Nobody talked to him, asked him what is he doing. They're saying he had a drone that he was using beforehand to kind of get the layout. Nobody questioned that. He was able to get a ladder, climb up on the ladder. Nobody questioned that. He's on the top of the building, crawling to get his vantage point so he can let off a successful shot. Nobody questioned that except for the attendees, right? The people who are there at the rally. They're like, hey, look on that roof. There's a guy on the roof with a gun. Does Secret Service react to it? No. So that should be the focus of this whole testimony. And the lady, Director Cheadle, should not be the director. This should not be. One of those senators brought up, when you got installed as director of Secret Service, what was the competition like for you? Did somebody maybe put a good word in, President Biden or somebody else? It's kind of like that DEI thing, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Also, known as, I think more popular known as DIE, right? Die, you know what I'm saying? Because that's what it does, right? You people get certain positions based on what they look like and what they identify as, and it doesn't turn out the best. Because a lot when you try to pick people because they're a female or because they're black or they're Native American or whatever the case is, that's not why you choose somebody. You choose people based on their merit, based on what they've shown you that they can do, right? They've shown what they've been successful in doing. You get people like that, not based on what they look like or how they identify. And that it looks like with this lady, it looks like she has gotten a job based on being a female, right? That's just what it looks like. And now we've seen what happened. To me, it's just a failure on not only the part of who put her in position, but also herself, right? She had dropped the ball tremendously. And I think there's other aspects of this that aren't really gonna have too much light shown on it because of the whole, they love to say conspiracy theory, but it's not a conspiracy theory because the guy BlackRock, they admitted, yes, he was in our commercial. So BlackRock, if you don't know what that is, basically, it doesn't get much higher than BlackRock. BlackRock is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, like investment management firm in the world. Okay. If you can think of a company off the top of your head, most likely they're overseen by BlackRock. So this is, big. Look up Larry Fink. All right. Larry Fink is the founder and CEO. Look him up. Read about him. Anytime you're talking about BlackRock, you're talking about people who make things happen. people ask me, well, who's at the top of the food chain? Like who's making, they always say, the Illuminati and all this type of stuff. Who's making decisions? Well, I don't know about the Illuminati and all that, but BlackRock is at the top as far as we're talking about making policy, pushing laws, that type of thing, lobbying. BlackRock is going to be one of those companies that's making decisions. All right. So a guy was in their commercial and he was the attempted assassin. Right. That's more than coincidence. Right. It's not, that's not coincidence. It's not coincidence. But that's, I don't want to give y'all too much. I don't want to give y'all too much. I don't want to go down too far into the rabbit hole, but I want y'all to just think about why certain things happen at certain times. And remember, President Trump has been attacked since 2015. Since 2015, since he said he was running, and I wasn't on board at first. I thought he was just being a gimmick. I thought he was being Hollywood. I thought he just wanted attention. I didn't think he was really serious about it. But he became president, and the media was all against him. Celebrities as a whole was all against him. The Democratic Party, like you got all of this pressure that was put on President Trump just for running for president, right? Putting the R for Republican beside his name. And he became president, did an awesome job. Fast forward, he so-called lost an election. I mean, really, he I think Biden was installed. That's just what it looked like. He was installed as president, and then so they've done everything they could to keep Trump out of the way, right? He became president. That wasn't supposed to happen. He became president, did such a great job that they're like, we can't have this happen again. So 2020, they did the voting irregularity stuff, and Biden was put in. Fast forward, now there's an election coming up. Trump is the front runner. What else can they do to keep him? They tried to indict him. They indicted him. They convicted him of 34 felonies. They tried to do all this stuff that's never happened to any other president. They've done all this to try to keep this man from running. He's still running. What's left to do? Oh, a guy shoots him. That's all they got left to take him out. The only way that the surefire way to make sure that he doesn't be president again is for them to assassinate him. That's it. That was the effort. They just did it. We just watched it. They hate this man so much that they are willing to take his life because the things that he was able to do in just 4 years as president, never before seen. I mean, I personally, I was alive for Clinton. I remember when Clinton was in office. Of course, following him was Bush. I remember Obama. Like none of those presidents did the things that President Trump did, as far as tax relief for us, as far as making sure foreign relations was top notch. No wars were breaking out, right? Just I can go on and on. The border security was getting so much better than it has been, especially under Obama. It was terrible, horrendous. We saw things happening that we had not seen happen under another president. That's what they fear. They fear President Trump getting back in and continuing what he was already doing. I have my hangups with President Trump. There's certain things that I don't rock with, I don't like, I don't appreciate. But I have to be honest and I have to be clear-headed in looking at the overall picture. Right? The overall picture is, do we push the Democrat side, which has done nothing but push our society in a more radical, unsafe direction? We've got, I mean, as soon as Biden got in, the world just falling apart. I mean, you got Russia going to war with Ukraine. You got Palestine, which is not even a nation. You got them fighting against Israel, which is a real nation. I mean, none of this was happening under Trump, but now Biden is in. As soon as he comes in, everybody's like, "Oh, we can do whatever we want now." Do I want that? Well, now Biden's out of there, so now I guess they're pushing Kamala, whatever her name is, Camel. I don't know. They're pushing her, right? Do I want her to be president, or do I want a person who's tried and true, who's not going to give up, who's going to? They're going to continue to kick him. He's going to continue to rise up, and be president and do things in the right way. I want President Trump. This is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. People can get caught on Trump is, mean. Trump said grab him by the what and all this type of stuff. Newsflash, ladies, women listening. Most men talk like that among other men. It's just how we talk. It's just, I mean, not saying we do that lifelong, like we just talk like whatever, but I'm saying most males get to a certain age, you start talking a certain way. Okay? Don't get mad because women, y'all do the same thing when it comes to talking about men. So let's push that to the side. Let's push all your emotion and all that stuff and act like, you're you would never or you have never. Let's push that to the side and just be honest. Is it more important to worry about what the man said in an interview with another man, or when he was actually president and he was making sure that your paycheck was better? He's making sure that you were secure as far as the border. He's making sure that no other country was trying to mess with us. North Korea, Iran, I don't care who it was. When ISIS was a problem, he took ISIS. I ain't heard nothing about ISIS since 2018 or something. I mean, it's more important to put a person in that's going to take care of business, that's going to make sure the house is good. That's what Trump was doing for America. He was making sure we were good. Kamala, Camel, whatever her name is, she's not going to do that. Not going to do that at all. We're going to go further downhill. We've already gone downhill under Biden enough. If she is able to get in there some kind of way, Lord knows, I don't know how she's going to do it. I don't know how they have to do some all kind of corruption and stuff to get her in there. I mean, they did it with Biden, but they're going to have to do even more to get her in. But by chance, if she does get in, man, it's going to be all the complaining people doing about gas prices, inflation, and all this stuff. It's going to be worse. It's going to be worse. It just is. There'll be more security breakdowns. You'll see more these DEI hires where Secret Service is not doing their job. You're going to see police departments fall apart. I mean, it's going to be more and more. We've seen it happen in just the last few years. It's going to happen more and more and faster. You put somebody like Kamala in, it's going to happen faster. So I hope y'all, when y'all go to the poll, make sure y'all go vote. Come November, go vote. If you are listening to me, don't sit at the house. Don't assume that a certain person has already won. Don't do any of that. Don't leave it for any opportunity for the other side to win. All right. If you're voting Trump, go to the poll. And if you're standing in line and then you're looking on your phone and they're like, in whatever state you live in, they say, oh, it's already been called for the other side, whoever's running against Trump, whoever that may be, they're saying, oh, it's been called for that person. No need to vote for Trump. It's already, your state's already decided who's going to be president. Don't listen to that. Go vote. Go vote until the polls have closed. Because last time there were issues in places like Arizona where they called it for Biden, but the people who were in line, the votes was close enough to where they would have made a difference. But because the news said, oh, it's called, it's good, it's already going to Biden, people went home. Can't have that happen. Go vote. Don't leave it up for chance. We can't have any weird stuff going on. Cannot. Don't allow the weird stuff to outweigh us with boots on the ground going and voting. Right? All right, man. I'm gonna get up off of here. Uh like I said, I hope the director Cheeto of Secret Service, hope she steps down or she gets fired or whatever the case is, but she don't need to be in place. They need to get somebody that knows what they're doing and will do a good job and make sure they protect our president, right? That's my president at least. I don't know about this. The Biden guy that's not my president. I respect him. I wouldn't want anything to happen to the man as far as what happened to Trump. I wouldn't want that to happen to Biden. But he's not my president, right? President Trump, my president, and I'm voting for Trump come this November. All right. So God bless him. God bless this country. Man, God bless y'all. Appreciate y'all for hopping on here, riding with me, watching. All right. Until next time, I'm gonna holler at y'all next go round. I'm gone.